and I'm honored to have with me from England, Syntyche Djunga. And she has some interesting TikTok videos, which I've seen. And I'm going to let her discuss her own thoughts and journey and how she got in a position where she is, in a sense, kind of, building narratives, becoming a thought leader.
Okay then. Yeah, so my name is Syntyche. Most people know me as Brown and BG online. Just a bit of a backstory. My dad is a priest, so I grew up in a very Christian conservative household. But obviously, growing up, when you look online, when you look in the media, when you look at what you're seeing in school, it's not really something that's seen as cool. So growing up for most of my life, I pretty much hated that upbringing. I hated the very strict traditional African household that I'd grown up in. And it wasn't until I went to uni where I finally had my freedom and I finally escaped the regime of my parents, that I realized that, my parents were right the whole time. I experimented with everything I was told not to experiment with, and it just led to depression. It led to me being overweight. It just led to a lot of sadness and depression. So I just decided to go back to my roots, which is Christianity. And through Christianity and Christ, that's just where I found peace, is where I found contentment, is where I find just understanding of life. And I just feel like there's a lot of young people who are experiencing exactly what I was feeling during my freedom era, and which is just depression and sadness. And we see that if you look at the rates of mental health and depression and suicide, it's like everyone is almost falling off. And I genuinely believe that is because there is a lack of Christ in people. There's a lack of Christian values in society. Is either people are acting in a very, I hate to say, atheist way, or they are accepting religions that I personally don't believe are the true religions. And so with my social media platform, I've always been very creative. I've always been very good at editing. I've always been very vocal. I've always been very great at engaging with people. And I decided to just do a whole 360. I used to be like a fashion influencer. I just decided to do a whole 360 with my platform and speak more about God on my platform. But I didn't want to do it in like a preachy way. I wanted to do it in a very logical way, speak about what's going on in the world, whether it's politics, whether it's social issues, even just what's going on in entertainment and Hollywood, and link that with Christ and basically prove to people why Christ's way is always the best way. So yeah, that's basically what I do with my platform, and it's received quite a lot of backlash, but yeah, nothing I can't handle.
Well, that's fascinating. Winston Churchill once said, "Nobody young who's not liberal has any heart, and nobody older who's not conservative has any brains." Something of that sort.
Yeah,
So I think we all go through that journey. But you've been, I personally, I grew up in New York City, and at the time I grew up, it's not necessarily that so different from today. People were either on the left or further left than that. It was kind of a one-party state of Democrats, your Labor Party, and I never really met a Republican or conservative at all. And I went through. I was the kind of went through my left-leaning phase. I was the McGovern for president coordinator for my high school one year in 1972 when he ran against Nixon. We saw Nixon as evil and all that kind of stuff. So these things play out, and I think over time you get more conservative values. I kind of applaud you for condensing a little bit because I think you're younger than the time in which I made my changeover. But before I ask you a question, I'll just preface it again with personal experience that I had a lot of ostracization. I was cut off and vilified and called names by a lot of the people that I considered my friends, and including some that you can't, that family and whatnot, and as being a total traitor to whatever cause it was seen as, that you had to some way kind of extend kind of leftism because it's a family business or something like that. So that wasn't necessarily in your case, but I guess the question would be: you make friends, you lose friends. Did you find that, and how do you deal with the other half, or is there is it just kind of all part of swimming the right swim?
Yeah, so I won't necessarily say I lost friends. I feel like I have a very strong system of friends where, if they don't agree with me, we're still able to maintain a friendship. But I will say I've had arguments, and I've definitely had almost fallouts with my friendships over my opinions on things. And you see, with me, I just like to look at things in terms of just outcome. When I look at the outcome of certain people's mindsets, I just think to myself, this is not the path that I would want to follow. This is not the outcome I would want for myself. So why would I now, force myself to change my values or change my beliefs if I know your outcome isn't the outcome I would want for myself? So yeah, I've definitely had a lot of people disagree with me, but thank God I actually do have very strong friendships, whether, I have good opinions or bad, there's still love there. And it is very difficult because I feel like I am fighting for a very good cause, and I feel like everyone has just been brainwashed by all of this liberalism that they can't see, what's really going on. And yeah, but I've always been pretty thick-skinned from a very young age. People's opinions isn't something that affects me that badly. So yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Well, that's well put.
Mhm.
So, what I think there's kind of a double standard. I think you brought this up on your own, that in comedy and in the press, when it's always okay to insult certain groups, and certainly not other groups. There are, to use the Indian term, there are sacred cows in
Mhm.
society, and do you notice that at all?
I'm sorry, you was breaking up just a little bit. So
I
can
apologize.
you just
Do
repeat
you
the
notice? Do you
question?
notice?
Sorry.
Do you
Yeah.
notice or get the sense that there are certain groups that it's okay to insult, say religious groups, and
Mhm.
certain that they're not? Is there a double standard in the press and society? Are certain groups being protected from scrutiny or from criticism?
Oh yeah, 100%. You see that everywhere. You see it with men and women. You see it with black and white. You even see it with religion. So, for example, men and women, for example, I feel like if you look at the messaging that's giving to women, it's always you're beautiful the way you are. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. This is something that's being told to women from the time that they're 5 years old. I was receiving those messages. And then, they tell women you have to set boundaries, you have to have this type of whatever lifestyle you want for yourself, you can maintain it. But with men, on the other hand, it's like if a man ever tries to tell a woman or give women any form of criticism about herself, he's all of a sudden narcissistic or toxic masculinity. It's the same thing with maybe the black and white community. For example, black people, I hate to say it, but they spew out a lot of racist terms towards white people, or people who are just not black. And the minute a white person does the same thing, it's an issue. You even see that with the police as well. If a black person attacks another black person, um, silence. You don't hear anything. But let a white person even just stop a black guy for something, now is racial profiling. And I think the most popular one that I'm really trying to, make bring light to with my social media platform is obviously the double standards when it comes to Christianity. I've lost count of how many times I've repeated in my videos that every other religion is allowed to share their views, every other religion is allowed to say what they want. But the minute a Christian actually even with what we've seen with Candace Owens, just for her to say Christ is king, there was like this uproar of like anti-Semitism and you're this and you're that, and this is a hate speech. So there's double standards everywhere, and I definitely like to point that out in my videos and make light to it and just help people to understand, like, how does that make sense? And the generation that's always talking about free speech this and free speech that, how come it always seems as though certain groups can't say certain things but the other groups can? And I definitely feel like it's a political thing as well. It's all political gain for certain parties. So yeah, the double standards are so obvious.
I think it's more than double standards. I mean, I agree with you. The Candace Owens things, I think, is more complicated than that, because I think it has to do with things she said about the Israel massacre by Hamas and so forth. And I'm not going to really go down that road. And then there's certain weighted terms, but in general, I agree with you. I think that numerically the most oppressed group on earth are Christians. I think um, given the small number of Jews, and the single country that Jews run, I think on a magnified basis, it's anti-Semitism and Jewish hatred of Jews and so forth, and othering of Jews. But numerically, I think around the world, I think Christians are being oppressed, and I think there are slaughters happening, in Nigeria, for instance, on a fairly regular basis. There's Boko Haram, and there's all kinds of kind of restrictions. It just seems to me a funny thing that Islam is treated ecumenically in Christian-oriented countries, but Christians can't, until very, very recently, in tiny fora in Dubai and little, I believe, it can't really proselytize or even go to church in Muslim countries. I think Iran allows some Christian churches. I think Lebanon, so forth. So it's not across the board, but in vast swaths of the Arab world, Christians are treated horribly. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that. I mean, obviously there's Darfur and South Sudan and whatnot, but I wonder whether you have any thought or sensibility about that.
Yeah, one thing I speak a lot about in my videos is the fact that Christianity is under full attack. There's no denying that. You see it in the media, you see it in Hollywood, even just the situation with Bishop Mari Emmanuel. I hope I pronounced that right.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? The whole Muslim came and tried to stab him. So there's just this full attack on Christianity wherever you go, whether it's quite silent or whether it's loudly. And I personally believe that it's because it is the one true religion. Satan will not attack a lie because he is a liar, and Satan will not attack anything that's a threat to him. So this is what's happening, because like I said, every other religion can publicly celebrate the religion, can probably publicly shout out their beliefs from the top of their lungs. And once a Christian does it, it's always a problem. It's always as though we are being annoying or judgmental and all of these attacks. So yeah, I try to get people to realize that this is not a coincidence and these are not by accidents. This is like a full-blown spiritual and very strategic attack on Christianity. And I genuinely believe it's because it is the one true religion. And I try to make people realize that don't take these attacks as an offense. Take these attacks as confirmation that it is the one true.
Yeah, it's like you don't get hit unless you're over the target.
Yeah, literally.
No, I think there's something there.
What's your opinion? What's your opinion on it?
Well, my opinion is that it really is. It's not so much every religion is being shouted from the rooftops. I think there's one religion that's being shouted from the rooftops. I think it's a clash of cultures of Islam versus Christianity. I don't think it's anything new. Europe itself, people see all these Christian nations, but it's not that long ago that there was the Battle of Vienna, and Vienna is in Central Europe. Spain was under the Moors. Greece and both the Balkans were under the Ottomans. There has been kind of this back and forth of conquering. There's kind of this terminology of colonialism. That certain countries are colonial, like England had its colonies, France had its colonies, even Belgium had its colonies, even Germany had colonies, and there's a sense that Israel's a colony, so forth. But Islam, I think has a huge swath, all the way from Indonesia, Malaysia, you name it, all the way up to West Africa, and now beyond. There are Hezbollah cells in Venezuela and Paraguay. It's a proselytizing religion. So I think there are two types of religions. Religions that proselytize and grow, and religions that die. And the other religions don't seem to be as active. There's Shinto and Hindu, Buddhist, and whatnot, but they don't seem to be actively on the march proselytizing. Those seem to be inner religions. I think there is a very small branch of Judaism that might proselytize, but it's in the minority. Jews don't really go about on the street corners proselytizing. But Islam did not spread by pamphlets. Islam spread under the sword, and this kind of aggressive. People who worry about toxic masculinity, I mean, they need go no further than, Hamas's massacre. I mean, it's all men, and they slaughtered and after raping women and whatnot. So there's a lot of masculinity there. There are no women Hamas fighters, and I think it's a clash of cultures. And I think it's Christianity is more based on the teachings of Jesus, which have to do with the word, and you'll be the message will pass by the word. It's not to say that Christianity didn't have its colonization by arms and whatnot. A fair amount of Latin America it was aggressive, or some was aggressive, some wasn't. But in the modern day, Christians have not been overtaking other countries and colonializing their minds by violence. And I think that the efforts of ISIS and a lot of the Islamic movements, Muslim Brotherhood, have been very cruel to Christians. And we see, a flight from Lebanon, from Egypt, and I think there are actual battles on the ground that we don't really hear that much about, mostly centered in Africa. So I think there's kind of obviously Islam in current manifestation, not everywhere, not everyone practicing has, but the one that's in the news is a much more violent process. And I think that plays out in the minor sense in that, stabbing of the I don't know what his title is, bishop or whatever, the Presbyterian Church in Australia. I don't think you see any Christians stabbing imams. I don't think that. You'd have to go search, but I don't think you see that very much. And I think it's kind of a unilateral, violent tendency. This, again, not all Muslims, etc. But if you're going to see a terrorist attack, there's very high likelihood it's Muslim and it's certainly not Christian and Shinto or other religions. I don't think you see that much of it. It's not to say it doesn't ever happen.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely agree. For example, if you look at the statement that Andrew Tate made, he went online and basically said, finally, you Christians are finally standing up for yourself, because there was an uproar over the fact that, the bishop was stabbed. And he was basically saying something along the lines of how, finally, you Christians are standing up for yourselves. This is why you guys have been looking weak for so many years. And I actually really like Andrew Tate. I have a lot of respect for him and what he's doing for young men. But you can like someone and not agree with some of the things that he said. And what he said relating to Christians, becoming more violent. Like, even if you just put religion aside, anyone who acts out violently just for difference of opinion or because somebody spoke badly about your prophet or your Lord, that's not maturity. So, the same way he's saying this is why Christianity is seen as a weak religion, this is also why Islam is seen as a very violent religion, because I may be wrong, I don't know what their scripture says, but there seems to be this tendency where it's like, if someone says something that they don't agree with or speak out on it, there's always a violent consequence. Like, for example, I saw something on Twitter that a month ago where two young boys were absolutely brutally killed in India simply because they mispronounced the prophet's name. And you could literally see the mother absolutely crying, absolutely traumatized. And you can also see the women around her, they were trying to stop her from crying. And it just makes me think, like, no disrespect to their religion, but what type of religion like even condones that level of violence for just minor things like misunderstandings? And again, no offense to Muslims, but this is why I genuinely believe Christianity is the one true religion, because it's the only religion that offers grace. Like, you don't love someone until you offer someone grace and a second chance to change. And that's exactly what Christianity does. Jesus dying on the cross and resurrecting isn't just a story for decoration. It's a story about Christ giving people a second chance. And that's what you call love, second chances. But brutally or violently acting out towards someone over a minor mistake or because they said something you didn't agree with, that's not love. And I don't see that as religious. So that's my take on it.
Are there places where you're asked to speak? Have you been called upon to speak places or in debate or anything like that?
No, I've literally kind of just started this whole career slash platform literally like maybe 6 months ago. The only place I've been asked to speak on was maybe GB News, but that was just to speak on the racial divide between the Asian community and the Black community over this incident that happened at a hair shop. Um, and yeah,
I heard
that's
that was
pretty,
Peckham or something, wasn't it?
yeah, the Beckham protest is just
How long
absolutely.
ago? How long ago was that? I was looking at it just now
Mhm.
in advance of our interview, and I had not heard of
I
it
was,
till today. Um, but my understanding, I watched the video, and
mm,
my understanding is a woman comes in the store, and I guess she's shoplifting. I don't know the evidence of that, but the proprietor, and I believe he's Indian, blocks her exit, and she takes the basket and well, I mean, first he, and then she tries to get around, and he detains her, and it said he strangles her, and I watched the video 3 times and from different angles. I don't think he's strangling her. You know, strangling her, she would not she would have been dead. He's a big
yeah.
man. He looks like about 6 feet tall or more. Um,
Mhm.
and strong and middle aged, whatever. And I don't think it would be any match if he really wanted to kill her. So he
Mhm.
did a bad job of strangling her, if that's what he intended to do. And
Mhm.
meanwhile, she's taking this basket, whacking him in the head and whatnot, and she's acting out. And I can't imagine he's running a store by accosting every customer. So I'm assuming this is a
Mhm.
rarity that he would stop and block somebody, and all she had to do was give up the
Mhm.
items that she had in her basket, or show the receipt and say, "Oh, you're wrong." I mean, it's a small store, and I think he's the only guy at the cash register. So I don't think it would have been, "Oh, I bought it somewhere." I think he would know the things in that store. I ran my own medical office, and they weren't seeing any other doctors. They can't think, pretty much
Mhm.
running your own store. You know what's going on. You know the stuff there and who paid for it. So I tend to believe him on that. And he was interviewed later and said he never strangled her, and he was holding her by the hair, whatever. But even if he had his hands around her neck at some point, he was not actively strangling her. She was yelling rape as well. He didn't rape her.
Oh, I
So
see
I
that.
think this kind of bee sting kind of thing that you're going to start screaming, and it's going to become a racial thing. It would have been easier for her in a sense if he were whiter skinned than he is. Um, but you can't necessarily pull the race card when all these different races are. I assume Peckham's part of London. I'm not sure, but London is like a minority, historical English place now. I think 40% of the population that had their great grandparents, born in England, and it's a racial melting pot. And it's hard to claim the race card all the time. You go and shoplift, and maybe you shouldn't be manhandled, but on the other hand, you shouldn't be shoplifting.
Yeah, yeah. This just goes back to what I said when I said just double standards. I definitely feel like the whole Black Lives Matter movement, definitely, what's the word? It gave a majority Black people this sense of privilege that they can basically do what they want. And if somebody questions it, then it's automatically racism. So the race card has kind of become Black people's pass to doing criminal activities. And I just don't agree with that. Like, we can't be sitting here talking about we want equality, but wanting to be treated like privileged citizens. So this is what I mean when I say there's just double standards everywhere. And a lot of people were saying it wouldn't happen if this is where I actually had arguments with my own family members. They were saying this wouldn't happen if this wasn't a white woman. This wouldn't happen if it was another racial woman. I'm just like, no, it would happen. The way she hit him on the head, like to be hit in your temple is a very triggering point. So that's what I try so hard to speak up against, because again, I grew up in a very like conservative traditional household where there was always consequences to your actions. Even if I lied to my dad, there was a consequence. And I just don't believe in this idea of free passes because you have a brown skin tone. That means you can get away with certain things. That is how our community will never progress. If we continue
Yeah,
to not hold each other accountable, this is where,
I know it's an amazing thing.
community will continue to be at the bottom of the pyramid. And we think in our minds that we're actually getting somewhere on top of the pyramid because we have this race card now. But in terms of just like, again, criminal activity, it's only going to increase. We're only going to have more Black people in jail. So
Yeah, lots of
I'm
things.
so against it. I'm all about accountability. If you've done something wrong, you suffer the consequences. And again, how many
And
people
that's
are
how
not
you
alleged?
learn. That's how you
That's how
learn.
we learn. That's how we learn.
There was, this is way before the internet. This is probably like 40 years ago. I was reading a letter to the newspaper, And for all our listeners, the newspaper is made out of paper. I'm just kidding. So this was in the newspaper, and a guy wrote in. He said, "I was stopped and screamed at in traffic the other day, and I'm really happy about that." Something like that. And you read the letter, it's like, why would he be happy? He says, "Well, I got to tell you, it was before cell phones, but I was thinking about something else. My mind was astray, and I swerved into the wrong lane, and I cut this guy off. Whatever. He did some bad traffic thing, and the guy started screaming at him, honking at him. But then, as soon as he pulled up to my car and saw that I was black, or whatever the word was at the time, African American, he stopped, and he was horrified that he was yelling at me. And then he smiled and moved on. He says, no, I needed to be screamed at. I made a traffic mistake. And if he didn't yell at me, I might have crashed into somebody. If he hadn't honked, I might have done worse. I might have killed all of us. Who knows? So it was the right thing to do to reprimand me, and to later to hold back and not be angry because I'd been an idiot but black. I mean, why is it okay if I've been an idiot and white? Why would that be better? Anyway, I'm kind of elaborating on his letter. I'm sure it was shorter than that. But basically his point was, I want to be judged by my good or bad driving, and there's nothing magical about being, darker skinned and making you a better driver or above reproach. And anyway, I think that the generalized sentiment, I understand, there are historic racial things, and I have lived only in the body that I've lived in and so forth. But, people are not helped by thinking they can kind of, again, it's the analogy is race card, as if it's a special card you can show. But I think there's a fair amount of that. People just do not want to get these days, not newspaper. These days, everyone's got a video camera, and you say the wrong thing, it gets edited a certain way, and then boom, you are vilified. I mean, this guy in Peckham, I think he was doing a very reasonable job. Again, he maybe he's not perfect, maybe he's not trained as a bodyguard, all that kind of stuff. But stealing's not what you should be doing from that guy's store. I mean, if you just allow it, you just get more and more of it. We see this mass. I don't know what they're called, but they're like mob theft. I don't know if you have that in the UK. Everyone seems to, they all have cell phones. They all know what to do. I don't know. They get groups or whatever, and they just barrage and pillage a store.
Literally. And if someone says something, then automatically you're racist and you're using your privilege against me. And that's just what I'm so against, because I didn't grow up like that. I don't want to say I'm a perfect person, but I do have quite a good, decent life. I've graduated, I have a well-paid job. And if I am in the position that I am today, where I've never been in trouble with the law, I've never been in any real troubles, because I actually received that discipline from my parents. Whereas like, if you've done something wrong, like you're gonna receive the consequences. And I'm just absolutely against that. And another thing is that it's just a complete contradiction. What the community that shouts the loudest when it comes to the term equality. But again, equality doesn't look like not lecturing someone, whilst they've almost killed someone during the car situation that you was explaining, because they're black. That is not equality. That's genuinely privilege. And I'm just against it, because it's going to cause a society of chaos. And it's like, when you say things like that, the first thing they say is like, you're a coon, you're an Uncle Tom, it's like you're dancing for the white man. And it's just like, but how could, like, me saying these things just goes to show how much I actually care for my community, because we all know the consequences of these things. Like, you could go jail. Like, why would I want more of my own people, my own race, to commit more crimes and spend more time jail, only for us to come back?
But these thefts and these crimes, they don't do well, for your community. Like, everyone's got a community these days. If you're, except if you're, say, white, if I or Christian, whatever, the Christian community, the whites community, like you have a community only if you are somehow working against the man, as it were. And I tell you, the man is not the man anymore. In the UK, I think every single one of the man, whether it's the mayor of London, the prime minister, the prime minister of Scotland, until recently the prime minister of Ireland, and now Wales. There's not a white man there, and not that it matters, but it comes down to politics one way or another. And Rishi Sunak and Sadiq Khan don't agree politically per se, but it's irrelevancy. I mean, policies are policies. Policies are colorless, but having this kind of like race card thing predominate, it ruins the community. Because if you have, I don't know if you have Walmart there, but whatever the department stores are, they close up. They in Chicago, there was I think there in the United States, I think there are four, I don't know, I'm not sure the number, couple thousand Chick-fil-A stores, and they've never closed one. Ever. Except there's one store in Oakland, California, which had like 2,000 like burglaries along the drive-through line. That people were accosted on the drive-through, just waiting in line, but just sitting in Oakland for more than a few seconds. Anyway, the number of people they being harassed and so forth for the crime of buying chicken, in Oakland was horrible, and it was not policed. And Oakland is kind of the it's next to San Francisco, but it's kind of the I think it's fair to say it's a black majority city, and it is high crime and so forth. I don't think it's because it's black per se, but I think the policies are very, very left oriented, kind of let everybody out of jail, kind of no bail kind of system, and this doesn't not work. I mean, it's nice to have Christian charity, as it were, but there has to be justice as well. And I think people have misinterpreted how people learn. The things that people would do at home. You're talking about your upbringing, and I remember this. Somebody said, every child is a savage, and we all need to be civilized. And the civilization happens either early at home or later, in prison. You get civilized by learning the ramifications and the repercussions of your actions. My ability to flail my arms around is limited by when it hits somebody else, when it hits somebody else's nose. So I can have freedom and liberty, but when it impinges on somebody else, that other person has feelings. And I think the essence of Christianity is the golden rule, to treat others as you would treat yourself. And when people lose that aspect, when in the Peckham incident, they're all concerned about the woman who was strangled, whatever, and because she identifies them from a skin color. But I don't think they're really looking at it from a moral sense about thou shalt not steal. And I think they're losing first principles. I don't think it's axiomatic and automatic that we have these imprinted on us. I think we see, in the absence of a rule system, in the absence of an upbringing, that people will just revert to, not full savagery, but aspects of it. People are doing all kinds of odd things that are, not just anti-Christian, but anti-moral. There's euthanasia, people marrying dogs, people acting like dogs, people, doing, strange sexual things.
Marrying dogs.
I think that people applied in Germany. I don't want to spend the whole hour talking about oddities, but you can almost rest assured, if you think of something, if you take two strange words and put them together, put them in Google, somebody's tried this thing, and so it's a funky world out there, and it's hard, I think, for people who don't want to be cool, who don't want to go with the flow, to set a different standard and hope and accept different behavior. I do think there are people out there who will come to you, and if you maintain yourself as a beacon and a voice.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And that's why in all my videos, I try to speak in a very strict and serious tone. Because I think what people need to understand is that if you don't manage this civilized behavior, we will start to have more barbaric behavior. One thing I really do talk about a lot and try to bring awareness to is the whole LGBT community. I used to be an advocate for it because in my mind, I just used to think, let people love themselves. Love is love. Like, let people be happy. Not until I started to do more digging and more research, I started to realize that this community, the LGBT community, is actually a push for the paedophilia community. And they've actually added a new term to this community, which is called the MAPS community. And that basically stands for minor attracted people. So they're basically normalizing paedophilia. They're normalizing adults having relationships with younger children. And this is what happens when you live in a society that doesn't allow people to hold others accountable and tell them where they're going wrong. It's like we live in this very overly sensitive, overly emotional society where everyone is just carried by their emotions, and they don't realize this is where we find ourselves in a position where pedophilia is literally being normalized. And it just goes back to what you said, is that there's just this fine line of just how in the world would you be able to create a civilized society if you don't speak out against wrongdoings,
Right.
because it only just escalates and leads to
No, it
more
does
barbaric.
escalate. And I think that there's a expression called a zero-sum game. I don't think free market economy, I don't think capitalism, I don't think civilization has been a zero sum. Generally speaking, if an transaction occurs, both people benefit. I follow sports, and so in basketball, if one team needs a tall center and the other one needs an agile shooting guard, and one team has two of those and the other team has two of the other, they make a trade, and both teams get better because the team that needed a center gets one from one who had too many. So this is the essence of all trade. The virtuous circle by Adam Smith, who's the Scottish economist and theologian, I believe, as well. He pointed out that the bricklayer doesn't lay bricks because he likes bricks. He learns how to use bricks because he likes food, and the guy with the cows doesn't grow food or meat or vegetables or whatever farm because he likes that stuff because he needs bricks for his house. And so everyone follows their own pathway. We basically do the trade like the basketball teams, and we better ourselves. So life is not a zero-sum game. You're exchanging your words helps not only you, but it helps the other person. And the other person giving you affirmation helps you and that other person. So basically we spiral up in the virtuous circle. But I don't think everything is like that. I don't think that. I think there is the not virtuous circle. There's the aspect of rights. And I think rights is a zero-sum game. There's only a certain amount of rights and approvals that we can give because there is a right and a wrong. And so the example I'm thinking of is this. You could think of 1,000 different ones like this, but the one I'm thinking of is just I saw on X earlier today. There's a 12-year-old girl in, I assume, middle school here, and there's a guy who named Mel who thinks he's a girl and has been allowed into the girls' bathrooms, locker rooms, and whatnot. And he has a list of the girls who don't. I don't know what his list is because the guy's obviously a little mentally disturbed to begin with, I would imagine, and he is going through a violent list to kind of cross all these girls off his list by bashing their heads. And so in the bathroom, he did this to a girl, and other girls witnessed this, and they're shrieking and whatnot. They didn't act like boys to beat him up because they're not boys, but he is acting like a boy in beating them up. So he brought his aggressiveness and his maleness, in whatever guise he thinks. Anyway, so his right to declare himself a girl and his right to be in the girls' bathroom is a subtraction to their rights of being girls and having some peace. So it becomes a zero sum. That is that there's no net benefit by adding this right. You don't just add a right and everyone's all better. When you add a specific right or privilege, you are oftentimes taking it from somebody else. And that's the issue here. And a lot of these things have been done over the centuries, and we came up with a system that's codified in religion, codified in the Ten Commandments, codified in the Golden Rule, that people can get along in a certain way and have a virtuous circle, as Adam Smith described, or not. And what we're seeing lately is the or not.
No, I 100% agree with you. First of all, that actually made me really upset that happened to those that young girl. But this is my problem with society, is that we live in such an emotional based society. Like, we have to accept someone's emotion. If someone views themselves as a dog, we have to accept that. If someone views themselves as the girl and they're so blatantly a man, we have to accept that. But that always comes at the consequence of another person. For example, the young man violently acting out on the younger woman. So, like you said, she didn't gain anything. He gained something. Maybe he let out his anger and now he can use the bathroom. But what did she gain from that? So again, it's like that fine line between right and wrong is completely gone, because right now it's not about right and wrong. It's just about how I feel. If I feel like I'm a man, you need to accept it. If I feel like I'm a dog, you need to accept it. And this is how we're going to lead to a very barbaric society. Like, do you know how many sexual assault cases that have taken place in bathrooms ever since we've started this whole transgenders being allowed in the bathroom? Way too many, but they don't report on it. Why? I will never understand. But I really, what you said really opened my eyes in terms of just like that transaction is like, what is the other person gaining? But most liberals don't care.
Yeah, no, it's a
Yeah.
sadness that liberals have no longer are no longer liberal. I mean, the actual term liberal means freedom. It's liberty, and liberals um, endeavored and tried to engender a liberal society. And the liberal arts were those things that the Romans had that would bring about freedom. Mind you, they had a class system and a caste system in a sense that you couldn't become slave to free. But leaving that aside for the moment, because their society wasn't perfect, ours isn't perfect. That they engendered to have people study the liberal arts, which would broaden their minds and help them keep a free society. And the idea was that you learn how to live, literature, for instance, was one of the liberal arts. You learn how to live inside somebody's mind by reading and so forth. There are ways that people can do better, ways people can do worse. And, they had, I don't want to be too school marmy here, but, when people abandon, the pathway that has been laid out in front of them, and they think they can somehow invent morality anew. They can invent the sexual relations anew. They can invent all this stuff. Well, fine, all well and good, but it comes at consequence, and the experiment could theoretically be done if you started your own island and called it, there's a place in Romania called Transylvania, but if you, made some island Transitionania, where you could transition all the time and, and have that in an isolated place. But this is not. This is, there are societies that have had different standards. I don't know if you're familiar with the Shakers. They were a religious sect in 19th century United States, and they were very austere. And one of their rules was that there would be no sexual relations at all. And so you join the Shaker community, and basically it's kind of like a nun, monastery or nunnery, and but they died out obviously because there were no future Shakers. I mean, it's a dead end. So you have societies that will grow or not, but you need cohesion, you need good standards and whatnot. And obviously, Islam has grown. There are people and populations have grown and whatnot. So there are some ways in which they have certain morality that I think we can appreciate. But the way that they rub up against other societies, that's a failing of theirs. I think Christianity in modern times is a far more open proposition. For instance, I just bring this one up. In Islam, it is apparently punishable by death to have apostasy, which is to leave the religion. I don't think Christianity does that. And I think that becomes kind of a question, if you can't criticize the religion, if you can't leave the religion under penalty of death, what is there?
Is it a religion?
Yeah. And so the question is, I think you have an interesting pathway because you were brought up in a religious way, but you were allowed to leave and think other things and move on, and then came back voluntarily. I think that gives you greater power.
Yeah. Going back to what you said about freedom and liberalism, I genuinely believe that liberals are just demons. That's the best way to describe them, because everything they promote genuinely leads to death. Like, for example, the whole racial wars, it leads to the death of equality between races. Even just feminism, sorry, it leads to the death of the family. Sexual liberation, it leads to more abortions, which leads to the death of children. Everything that liberalism promotes literally leads to death. So if death looks like freedom to them, then I will give them that. But I just think people need to think twice about what it is they are supporting. And ever since I started to read my Bible a bit more and go back to my roots from my parents, I've realized that the Christian life actually isn't about freedom. It's actually about self-sacrifice. It's about discipline. It's about boundaries. And it's like, once we lose that, like I said at the beginning, we kind of start to grow this very barbaric society where anything happens at the consequence of other people. And I'm just getting very sick and tired of it. And I like to bring awareness to that on my platform.
Well, that's lovely. I'm going to show people your platform in a little bit. I'm not on TikTok myself, but I've seen some of your videos and I applaud them.
I'm done with TikTok. keep
Yeah,
censoring
I'm gonna
videos and
step back from all liberals are demons, but I do think that they don't necessarily think through their policies in a logical way, and they let emotions flow over them to a point without fully um, you know fully analyzing situation. The thing I'm working on right now, I'm working on a chapter. It's an article on the opioid epidemic. And I have some experience, not as a user, but as a treater. I had a narcotic de-addiction program using Suboxone to taper people to sobriety. And it was not faith-based per se, but I did notice that nobody really got genuinely better for the longer kind of eternal duration unless they had faith, unless they found God in some way, manner, shape, form in their life. It could theoretically be kind of through the light version of AA or NA. Um, but unless they have some kind of faith or devotion, it was hard for them to exorcise, not exercise, but get rid of their demons, as it were. And we use that term loosely. We don't necessarily see demons in real life, but there are aspects. I mean, people see themselves as before pictures when they were doing drugs and they got on my program. And I encouraged 5 F's. I'm not sure I'm going to get them all right, but it was basically family, funds, which is working, faith, friends, and only lastly fun, which is finding some kind of release and so forth, but not pursuing fun to itself. People couldn't party as well. They called it partying when they're doing drugs, but they weren't really partying unless they were working first. You can't party unless you have work. You can't rest unless you've been working. Just eternal rest is death. Obviously, that's another phrase for it. But in my work on the methadone chapter, I'm finding something that you mentioned in a sense, which is kind of like the not the silver, but the dirty lining inside some of these ideas. The concept of adding methadone was to fix people who were doing heroin by giving them the same drug they were doing. And the assumption they couldn't learn, they couldn't get away from those behaviors. There's no way that people can be changed for the better, so we might as well give them the thing. A friend of mine was saying, like, if you liked cupcakes, or a group of people, were obese and they couldn't stop eating cupcakes. Cupcakes are so delicious. They started stealing cupcakes. You say, oh, well, stealing is bad, so we're going to give you cupcakes. Here's an infinite number of cupcakes. But it gets away from the point that we need to control ourselves. And the opposite of liberty is libertine. People have this kind of libertine sense where they can do anything they want. They think that is liberty, but in fact, it's addictive. It tethers you to the pursuit of goals that are contrary to the human spirit. And I think what Christianity brings is the sense that there is God within you, and you need to act appropriately. You need to treat your body with respect. You can't mutilate it. You have to treat others with that same respect. And I think that is something that I hope you're able to bring forward.
Yeah, I think that the main problem that we're having with society today is that we have way too much knowledge and very little wisdom. Knowledge looks like, I don't know, feeling sick, and a therapist tells you, okay, take this pill, and you take it. But wisdom will tell you whether this pill is actually going to help you long term, or whether this. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that was great. I love that. I want you to say it again.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me say that, feel like the problem with society today is we have very little knowledge, and the problem with society today is we have a lot of knowledge and very little wisdom. Do you understand? For example, knowledge will tell you that if you're not feeling well, if you're having a panic attack in the middle of the night, what you need to do is take this antidepressant pill and it will go away. But wisdom will tell you that you will become addicted to this pill, and this pill will only help you short term. So it just kind of goes back to what you said in relation to the drug that you was talking about. Knowledge is telling people that you need to take this drug to heal yourself, but wisdom will tell you that this is an addiction. And this is what I found when it comes to just liberalism and conservatism. I feel like everything that liberal preaches is just knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. You can castrate yourself if you feel like you are not a man or woman, whereas wisdom will tell you that you cannot do that to your body, and there's long-term consequences to that. But the reason why people are lacking so much wisdom is because wisdom starts with the fear of the Lord, and that's what's missing in our society, is that we no longer have that fear of God anymore. And I try to speak about it before it's too late. And yeah.
Well, it's never too late. It's never too late. It's never too late.
Yeah.
Getting back to Winston Churchill, my hero, You know, he's got loads of amazing quotes, but you know, we will fight, you know, to the end, and you have to keep that fight in you. And even if you don't win, it's the fight that's important, and you have to keep strong.
You reference Winston Churchill a lot. Is that someone you look up to a lot?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh,
Now the man
really?
was
Do you
amazing.
recommend him?
Yeah, yeah. I'll send you something. Um,
Yes, I would
but
love to.
uh, you know, he had, first of all, he's hilariously funny. He had his own problems, obviously. You know, none of us are made perfect, and so he probably drank too much. But he was a loyal husband and I think a reasonably good father, um, and very witty guy. But he went through a lot of phases of life. You know, he was a prisoner of war in the Boer War, early 20th century in South Africa, and managed to escape. You know, he had a sensibility of the actual working man that I think gets lost today. What we see from our leaders, we kind of see the reverse of populism. We don't see the national spirit. We don't see people who are proud of their flag or proud of their nation or proud of who they are. There's so much guilt. Um, this goes back a while. It's
Sorry.
not quite, it may not sound quite related, and we're going to round out the hour soon. But I was in an airline flight from Armenia back here, but we stopped in Qatar, which is, you know, one of the Arab Emirates. And it was a nice German guy. He was in his mid-20s or early 30s, and sitting next to me. And we were on this leg between Yerevan and Qatar, and he's basically running Qatar Airways. You know, they imported a lot of smart guys from Europe to run the place, and the guys, you know, with the wealth, the oil wealth, they're in the I can't remember the name of their gown, but they don't really work. They have their feet up and they manage everybody around. But I said, well, it's really amazing. You had a great German education. You know, you guys are awesome. Da da da. He says, well, anyway, the point of the story is he, as a German, thought there was nothing good about being German, and Germans had been horrible people. But like, if you go back, every nation's has had its ups and downs, but clearly he's there. He was imported for his essence of being able to be straightforward, direct, problem solver, good manager, all kinds of stuff. That didn't just happen. Obviously, if they had that in Qatar, then the Qataris would be running the airline. You know, they had to import that. And they imported you because of your, you know, Germanness or Europeanness or whatever it is. You know, you have to understand this is not a universal quality. You know, being able to, like, I mean, you know, do math. I mean, math is being called racist these days. You know, because they're right and wrong answers. Whatever. I mean, literally. And people don't want to see kind of like the qualities in the very simplest things, and that people should understand. Have a little more kind of humility and pride in what they do, if they're doing right and well, and are managing to kind of advance society.
Yeah, no, we see a lot of that in the UK. We see a lot of people who are born and bred in the UK, but they constantly complain about the fact that they are not British. They will never go to war for Britain. Britain ain't S. Constantly just dissing the country. And I also saw a video on Twitter where I saw like a group of Muslim people screaming like we need to bring back Sharia law. Is that what you call it? Sharia or Sharia? I don't know how to pronounce it. But they were saying that they need to bring back the Islamic law that they have in, I believe, in Iran and other Islamic countries into the UK. And I'm just like, you do realize you wouldn't even be able to say this in your country. That is the beauty of Britain, is that we actually have free speech. But yet people use that free speech to preach something that's actually going to put them in harm's way. So yeah, you have a
Plus,
lot
they
of
have
people
the
who are
option of moving there. I mean, I don't see why they just don't go there. Yeah, it's, you know, that
yeah.
people are funny. It's like, oh, I had to leave Syria. I had to leave, you know, because all the Islamic factions were fighting each other. I had to leave Iran because it's oppressive. I had to leave, you know, Lebanon. Whatever. It's like, you know, I had to leave, etc. And we're here in an open society, and screw you very much because we want to change back into those societies that we just left. I don't know. It's hard to say what that means, why people do it, but they do. So I want to. We're rounding out the hour. I want to have people a chance to find you on, let's say, here. Are you on TikTok here?
You're breaking up a little.
Yeah. So
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, but
sorry about that.
so I had So yeah, if you guys can all subscribe to me on YouTube. I do post on TikTok, but TikTok is becoming very censorish. They keep censoring my videos and threatening to take down my account. So
Right.
if you can please follow me on YouTube. My link is on my TikTok page. My YouTube is Brown and Bougie. No, sorry, it's Based and Bougie. I just changed the name. My TikTok is Brown and Bougie 0. Instagram is _Brown and Bougie _. And yeah, you can find me there. Also, I also run a business where I sell jewelry. It's called 2BG, 2 with double O. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I can pull this up. This is the Peckham thing. But okay. Anyway, people get them. We'll try to put links up on Twitter and whatnot, and give you the links there for your YouTube and so forth.
Before we go, I was even going to mention, because you are a big fan of Winston Churchill. Sorry, I'm not sure if you heard, but they're planning to make a Winston Churchill movie, but with a black guy.
Oh, really? Well, that's always hilarious. I'm waiting for the Nelson Mandela movie with a white guy.
Yeah. I thought I would tell you that since he's your favorite. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and I heard this thing where people said they were going to do a movie about Stephen Hawking, but they didn't hire a guy who has whatever illness he has to do it. It's like, dude. Anyway, it's all gotten silly. So I thank you for bringing some sanity to the world, and look forward to meeting and talking with you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
One quick self-promotion I want to just maybe end with. Let's see. I do, if people want to help support my video cast, this is a completely unrelated topic, but they can go buy my book. It's Overturning Zika, the pandemic that never was. I'm not going to spend time talking about it now, but it's 2015, 2016 Brazil. This was the biggest pandemic ever until COVID. And then it disappeared, but nobody talks about why it disappeared. There was a bunch of bad ideas that weren't scientifically proven, and you can read my book to find the great mystery thereof. Anyway, I'm going to have another book on narcotic addiction coming out hopefully in the next year, so people can keep their eyes out for that. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Have a